Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We're on day two of the Sahel bowler bag. And before we get started, I just want to very quickly make sure that all of my tech is working. So I have to let my brain catch up with my mouth. Make sure all of my tech is working and everything is visible. So give me 2 seconds and I will do that. Great, I'm back. So tonight, as I mentioned, is day two of the Sahel bowler bag. And for those of you who don't know which bag that is, it is this lovely bag right here. So today on day two, we will be working on constructing the exterior. So we're going to construct this whole top zipper portion along with the tabs and along with the bottom and adding on those purse feet to the bottom. We will also be going through step by step how to make these rolled handles, and these are attached actually into the seam or body of the bag. So that's what we will be doing today. If you were with me for day one or you missed day one just talked over very quickly about the preparation and what you needed to do to fuse down your foam, which is actually sewing, but we used interfacing to fuse it down. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Catherine, and I am the owner and founder of Sew Your Bag. I do have a monthly subscription box service, which this was the bag for the last subscription box. And we do 3 day sew along. So the first day is prepping, the second day is constructing the exterior, and the third day is doing the lining and putting everything all together. So let's get started and look at the pieces that we need and do a quick review. Hey, Susan. Yes, I can see your name. So you don't have to, I don't have to guess who you are, but yes, I think every time you log in, it will ask you, especially if you haven't done it in a while. So I find that I use StreamYard with other people, and if I do it once, it's fine for that time. But if it goes by like a month or more, it asks you to re-log in, and I don't know if it's an authentication thing or whatever that happens to be. So yes, I can see you and welcome. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to review the pieces that we're going to need for tonight, and then at the end of um, us sewing together the exterior, I will tell you the pieces that you need for tomorrow. So you will need, and I am doing my bag different from the material that was used in the actual subscription box. So this is the material that was used in the subscription box. I will be using different materials. So I will be using this material for the sew along. You will need a front and a back. And the front and the back are pattern pieces. And in part one, we reviewed how to piece those pieces together. And it's two separate pieces for the front and two separate pieces for the foam. Now, the foam, when we fused it to the back, and what I did is you will cut your foam. It will be smaller using your pattern pieces. It will be cut smaller. And then what you will do is use your interfacing to fuse it down because it is a sew-in interfacing, and I wanted to keep it out of the seam allowance. So I actually do it. I cut this smaller. So you'll need a front and a back. They will be identical. I'm going to make this my back, and I'm going to make this one my front only because it has that main motif. You're going to need as well the two pieces that for the zipper. So these two pieces are left and right on the top, and then the zipper will go down the middle. So that's those two pieces. Yesterday, I gave instructions on how, and in the pattern, it tells you, and it tells you how to cut it because it's one piece. You cut it lengthwise down the middle, and then you make sure that you mark your centers. And that's so that when we put the zipper in the middle, these two motifs, if you have them, actually match up. If it doesn't matter to you, then you can just cut it down the middle and just use them the way that they are. The next thing we're going to need is we're going to need our bottom piece. And this is made out of waterproof canvas. So we're using waterproof canvas. I'm using a cream in this case and a piece of foam. I, by habit, cut my foam larger usually on all sides, and then I stitch it down. The pattern tells you to cut it the exact measurement, but I cut mine larger. That's just a little tip. And then I come back and I trim it down, and that way I'm not fiddling with it. So that you're going to need that piece. We're also going to need, once we have all of those pieces, we're going to need the rolled handle pieces. Now, the rolled handle pieces use several pieces to construct it. So we will have these pieces and we will have a middle piece. So we'll need actually 4 of these pieces and we'll need 2 of these middle pieces. One rolled handle will have a top accent and a bottom accent and then the waterproof in the middle. That's just, I'm not on Facebook. I am on Facebook. Hold on one second. Please hold. So Nancy says I'm not. I am. It says I am live on Facebook. So I don't know how to change that. Give me 1 second. Let me just double check for those people who are on Facebook. And I use a streaming service, so sometimes it could be that. So hold on. I use a streaming service, so sometimes I am on. It could be that. So hold on. I am on Nancy. Yeah, I see she tagged me. I am on Facebook, Nancy. I saw that you tagged me. I don't know if you heard it. But that's interesting. So maybe it's a refresh on your side or something, or clearing the cache. So you're going to have the top and the bottom, and then you're going to have this will be the bottom, and then you're going to have a top piece, which is this piece, and we're going to put this on top of this. So then this will be the top of our handle. So what I mean is underneath here where you can't see is where the waterproof canvas is, but this whole piece here is this top piece that we're going to sew onto this. All right. And you'll need 2 sets of those. So you'll need 2 of these, and then 2 of these little guys here, or 4 of these little guys. So that's going to be for our handle. And then aside from that, you will need a piece of foam, which we're going to put on these pieces. And then when we fold it, it'll have a nice little cushy feel to it. So that's what the 2 pieces of foam are for. Okay. Okay, Nancy. Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for keeping me sane. Because it has been known to happen where I'm talking and I think I'm in a certain place and it's not happening for me. Okay, so once you have all of these pieces together, you will then need 2 tabs as well. So these 2 little tabs will go on the side and we'll talk about those. And then in here, I have some purse feet. So you'll need that and a screwdriver for the bottom. All right, so let's get started. Let's see where we are in the pattern for those of you who are following along with me, just to make sure that we're all in the same place. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do my tabs, and the tabs are done on page, it looks like page 8. Yep, page 8 of the pattern. And I did mine ahead of time. So let's talk through what I did here. So for the tabs, they're going to be one piece. So they're going to be open just like this. I interface them to give them some level of stability, so they're sturdy. You can run a piece of waterproof canvas down the middle if you want it to be a little bit sturdier. And if you're going to do that, you should make the waterproof canvas, and the center here is 3/4 of an inch, so slightly smaller than 3/4 of an inch. So you only need it in the middle, but with the interfacing, you should be good. This piece is 2 by 1.5, so you can see that, right? So I'm lengthwise, top to bottom, I should be 2 inches, and going across, it should be 1.5 inches. So that's how I lay it down. And then I draw a line 3/4 of an inch in from my 1.5 inch side. And that marks my center. And that's so that I don't have to do this fold and then refold. I just draw a line down the center. I then took that long edge and I folded that to the middle. And then I took the other long edge and I folded that to the middle. So that's how I ended up with the tab. And I did that for both, right? So both of them are like that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually come in here and we're going to top stitch at either 1/4, 1/8 of an inch. It doesn't matter, whichever one is easier for you, along both long edges. And then we're going to take those tabs and we're going to fold them in half just like that. And these tabs actually become the little tabs that are here on the side of the bag. Okay, so let's go to the sewing machine and do that. I will tell you there will be camera switching, so I'm hoping that that doesn't bother anybody when I do that. And I'll try to warn you beforehand by going, let's go to the sewing machine or let's go back to the cutting mat. And that way you have some heads up that I'm going to be doing that. And if I don't, keep me honest. Start screaming at me in the comments and telling me, Catherine, I can't see the sewing machine or I can't see the cutting mat. All right. So I'm using a stitch length of 4, which is a top stitch length. And that's what I will sew down the edge of both of these ends with. And I am using a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. For me, the 1/8 of an inch is the inside of my presser foot. On your machine, you'd have to know, some of the needles move. My needle does not move, so I can't position it. So I have to rely on either the plate or my presser foot itself. So let's sew down to both sides. And I don't know why my sewing machine's not coming on. 1 second, please. And I think it has to do because it's not plugged in. So let's plug it in. It's usually half the battle, right? If you don't have electricity, it won't work. I need one of the machines that use the pedal. Okay. Now I don't take it out normally. I just string them along. And then when I get to the end, I will cut my thread and then I will go back in the opposite direction on the other side. And I'm just going to flip this one over. Okay. So now let's go back to the cutting mat. And you can see that I've done that with these two. So I'm going to, for right now, I'm going to set those aside, but at least, excuse me, at least they're done. I'm just going to cut them in half, and I'm just going to stick them back in my little container over here. Excuse me. Hi, Miss Della. How are you? Okay, so I'm stick those back over there. So now we've done the tabs. We know what we're going to do. The next step, excuse me, the next step for us is going to be to assemble the rolled handles. So I'm on page 9, I believe. Page 9. Okay. So I'm going to get all those pieces that I had, which was this little stack here for my rolled handle. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with one of these. So one of each of these and this centerpiece. I will be going to the sewing machine. I'm just going to take, and you can look at which is the front or the back of this. Honestly, for this part of it, it doesn't really matter because it's hidden in the bag, but I do say right side and wrong side when I am giving you the instructions, but it really doesn't matter because all of this gets hidden. But you will take the right side of your waterproof canvas, and that's the side that's sort of scratchy and like fabric. And you'll take the right side of your fabric and you will lay them right sides together. So the wrong side of this should be facing out of your fabric, and you're going to clip it together along that short edge. You're going to do the same for the opposite side, and you're going to clip it that along the edge. So now I'm going to, because once again, I can't find my pieces. Made them in a nice stack, and I will cut another piece the same length as these for my other one. So when we go to the sewing machine, we'll do them all at the same time. So we're not doing them all separately. So let me just cut another piece, another 2 pieces for this. And I did not interface these. I don't care that they're stiff, because I think that the waterproof canvas will give it enough stiffness along with the foam. So, okay. All right. So now what I'll do is I will reclip this. Once again, it's right sides together, and you'll see what we do. And I'm going to take this piece. I will trim it off later as needed, because it is a little bit wide, but yours should be exactly the same size. So we'll have 2 of those, right? Because we need 2 rolled handles, just like that. We're going to go to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew along these clipped edges using a 1/4 of an inch. Wow. Nancy, you're cooking with gas. I think you and Della, you and Nancy are on the same page. I'm glad you got them done. So we're going to do a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance for this, and then we'll come back. So let's go over to the sewing machine. Now, for me, a 1/4 of an inch is the edge of my presser foot. Some people's machine, that is not the 1/4 of an inch for them. Some people, it's 3/8 of an inch. So I use a 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to turn the stitch length down to between a 3 or a 3.5. And I'm just going to sew those. Now I'm going to string this along like I did with those tabs. And I will back stitch at the beginning and the end. And I'll cut the threads when I'm done. Not worried about them. Okay. And let's go back to our So I'm just going to cut these apart. And then I'm just going to finger press them. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't do it off camera. Don't share this. Okay. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just finger press these open just like that. Not going to top stitch it. I don't need to top stitch it because, like I said, you're not going to see it. And I'm just going to open them up. So now we should have 2 of those. Now I'm going to take my foam piece, and I'm going to lay this on top of the foam piece, just like that. And you should have a gap on either side, and that's because that's going to be sewn into the seam, and I don't want the foam to be in the seam. All right, so I will have a little bit, I think it's a 1/2 of an inch on either side of my foam, so it is cut a little bit shorter, and that's because I don't want it to be in my, I don't want that bulk once again. So I'm just going to clip that in place. I'm going to do one, and while I'm at the sewing machine, I will do the other one as well. So I'm eyeballing this in the pattern. I tell you, I tell you what to do as far as leaving that bit off at the end and how to clip it. You can always fold this in half, the foam in half, and fold your strap in half as well. Mark the center and then just line up the centers. I'm just eyeballing it right now. And then I'm going to go back to the sewing machine and we're going to base stitch this in. So use a long stitch length for this, just so it goes very quickly. And I'm just going to base stitch all the way on both sides. You do not need to base stitch across the bottoms, the short ends, only along the sides. Okay, so let's go back. All right, and I'm starting at the top here. You can use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, once again, because you're not going to see it. I'm turning my sewing machine stitch length for me up to a 6, which is my longest stitch length on my machine. And I'm just going to sew down the long edges to attach the foam. That's it. Okay, that's one edge. A little bit wonky, but nobody's going to see it. And I'm going to do the other side. Okay, and let's do our other one. Okay, so let's go back to the cutting mat. So now I have those two pieces. I'm just going to clean this piece up just a little bit. I have a little bit of extra foam on the side. So that's all I'm doing. Okay. All right. So next what we're going to do is we're going to take our top piece. I'm pushing one aside and I'm just going to use one top piece. And I'm going to take this and we're going to need to lay this in such a way that it's face down. And then we're going to put this face up just like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fold these ends in just on both sides. To make it easier for you to do that, I have you draw a line going down both long edges and then we fold it. And that's just so you're not fiddling with it as much. If you've interfaced it as the direction said, what'll happen is once we put that crease in there, it's a lot easier to fold it over this way and clip it and for it to stay there. If you don't, this becomes very fiddly because it keeps wanting to roll away. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to draw my line and I'll do it on both of these pieces, and then we're going to do some ironing. And for those of you who are with me, let me tell you what page I'm on where I'm doing the ironing. Excuse me. I'm on page 11. So this is the part where you're going to draw the line, and this is the part where there are instructions on what you need to do to do this. Okay. So I'm just going to do this, and I will draw a line. So once you've drawn them, there'll be like a little gap in the middle, and that's totally fine. So there's a little gap right in the middle, and I can actually see that this side, as I was drawing the line, I could see that it's a little bit, there's a piece sticking out right here. So I'm just going to cut that off. So that's one. We're going to do the other one the same way. We're going to draw our line. We're going to flip it around, and we're going to draw the line on the other side. Then we're going to take out our cutting mat, our ironing board, and we're going to iron those to the center. So I thought this was important that we do this all together because it is a couple of different moving parts here. And I wanted to make sure that everybody, this was clear. The other parts where we just sew is usually not as challenging as, this, which has a lot of moving parts. So I'm going to fold this long edge here down to that line, just like that. And I'm going to iron. Now, I did use a pen for this. You should use an erasable marker. I did use a pen, but use something that erases. If you're using the friction types or friction type of pen, it will erase your lines as you iron because the iron is hot and it erases with heat. So you may want to do one line at a time. You may want to use a pencil, something that you can remove easily. A pencil won't iron away, but those pens will. So I'm going to do the same on this side. And I'll do the same for the other piece as well. It's kind of hot. And then I'll show you what I mean when you put it inside. So then if you take your foam piece that you just made and you open this up, when you slip it in there, it just makes it easier to fold this over and for it to stay. So when I fold it over, I can then just clip it in place. On both sides, and it will stay that way, right? It just makes it easier because you can feel the crease over here. All right. So we'll come back and do that after I've ironed this other piece. If you're comfortable enough and you don't feel like you have to, draw the line thing and do the ironing, and you're okay with it, with manipulating it, and it being a little not tamed into place, then you don't have to do this part. Sometimes I think there's more ironing in bag making than there is in quilting, especially when you're using cotton fabric. Hello, Miss Arnetta from rainy DC. I think you got Nancy's rain. Nancy was having a lot of rain. I think you got her rain. Nancy yesterday was saying, I didn't know she's going to invest in a boat. She thinks she's going to need a boat. Okay. So now that we've done that, let's go back and clip these in place. So I've already started this one, and I'm going to clip that down the sides. And if you need to, you can actually trim this a little bit. If it's not laying nicely over here, you can trim it, like trim off like about 1/8 so it lays in there. What's important is the outside, this measurement. This isn't as important because, like I said, you're not seeing it. So you can definitely, if you need to, trim it down a little bit, like about 1/8 of an inch, and it should fit in there nicely. I mentioned that I used the waterproof canvas instead of all cotton because I wanted to make sure that you didn't have any stretch at all in that rolled handle. When you're using cotton material to make bags, the straps can tend to, over time, can tend to stretch because it is a fiber, and it can tend to stretch over time and, get longer and longer and longer. All right, and now I'm going to do this side the same way. And I may need to trim mine. It's kind of snug in there. So I'm just going to trim off about 1/8 of an inch. It's just a little bit of a sliver off the edges. And believe me, you're not going to miss it. See, it's just a little tiny piece off the edge. And now we'll do it again. No, oh no, Nancy, it's not. It can't possibly be raining. Okay. Is this normal for this time of the year? Is it normal this time of the year to have, rain like that? I know we're going to get rain tomorrow, supposedly, but we haven't had much rain. Probably going to get Arnetta's rain. You're probably going to get the rain Arnetta had. Because she's in DC and I'm in New York. So it's probably going to travel this way. We need it, though. I was saying how we got no snow really this year. Here. So that probably means that this winter we'll get tons. Seems to be a wave. All right, so this is the tedious part, guys. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch this down flat. Oh, it's the rainy season. Yeah. I was talking to my team who actually sits over in Bangalore yesterday. And I believe it's their rainy season, but they were sitting in a conference room. And I'm like, oh, you guys are in a conference? They normally sit at their desk when we have calls. And they said, oh, some people didn't come in because of the rains, how much it was raining, and that roads were closed. So I guess we're lucky that there's no roads closed. But everybody should still be safe because of those thunder and especially the lightning. And if there's heavy winds. So that's one. It only took me about an hour and a half to do. And then I'm just going to trim this one just a little bit as well, because I cut them both the same. So I'm going to infer that if one was too wide, this one will be too wide also. And we'll do this one. Now, once we've done this, we are going to sew this on flat. So we will not be rolling the handles until later. Once we've sewn them onto the actual zipper portion or top zipper closure piece. And that's because it just makes it easier for this part here at the bottom to be square. I tried to do it where I pre-roll them, and then I came back and I was getting this like bowing happening. So that's why I decided not to do that, because I want it to be totally square on the bottom, or as square as you could possibly get it. All right, so we're going to do this. Hopefully I'll get it done a lot quicker the second time around. And I think once I show you guys how to do one, you can do the other one, but at least we have them prepped and ready to go. And add as many clips as you want, as you need. Notice I'm adding like 500 clips to this. But add as many clips as you need to get this in there. Oh, this one's very wide. Either it's very wide or the outside is very small. And it really doesn't, when you fold it in half, it won't, like if there's buckling on the inside or something, because don't worry about it. Like I said, you can trim the long edges or just push it in there. It's, you're not going to see it. So when I come back, I am going to take this when I'm done and I will fold it that way. And all you need to do is have those edges meet and you don't really see that buckling that's happening in the middle. So that's your 2 straps. So for right now, we're going to set those aside. We're not going to stitch them or do anything with them. And I'm just going to fact check myself right here. Oh, we have to do one set of stitches. So what we're going to do is I'll show you on the bag so you can understand. When we sew this in to the top here, what's going to happen is there will be a piece, and there's, yeah, here you go. So when we fold this in half right here, we won't be able to get our top stitching down into this area. So what I have you do is I have you top stitch a portion of this and then connect it later. So in other words, what we're going to do is we're going to take a measurement and we're going to top stitch between 2 areas right here, so that when I fold it, your top stitching will continue. It looks like it continues. So I hope that makes sense. We'll do it. And then once we're done with it, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So what's happening with our netta? Oh no, not the rest of the week. I think they just said for us, it's going to be tomorrow and Saturday. And I remember distinctly Saturday because I do gardening on Sunday. So that the garbage man can take the stuff away. But we need it. We need it. It helps. It's actually very humid up here. I can only imagine what's happening with you, Nancy, because just it not raining is humid. And I know when it rains, you get all that off the ground. Okay, so we're going to top stitch it 1/4 inch. But before we do that, we're going to make 2 lines. We're going to make a 1-inch line and a 2-inch line. So from the bottom over here, we're going to measure up 1 inch and then we're going to measure up 2 inches and we're going to draw a line. So this one, I will not use a pen. I will use an erasable pen. And I'm going to start, temporarily move my clip out of the way. And I'm going to start here and I'm going to draw a 1-inch line right here going across. And then I'm going to draw a 2-inch line. And those are the 2 lines that I'm going to stitch between. So there's one line here. And then we're going to draw another line here. And this is an erasable, a heat erasable pen. It's one of those friction pens. All right. And the reason we sew between these is because when we do our sewing down and we're going to sew around this way, what'll happen is we will be connecting the lines, the stitch lines that fall right in between here. And then when we do the rest of the strap to do the actual folding of the handle, we'll make sure it meets that stitch line. If we did not do this, then what would happen is we would end up having a gap of stitches in between because we can only get so close to it. So I hope that makes sense. So I'm going to do it on the other side as well. And that one's going to be hard to see, so I'm going to put a clip. And it's okay if you go a little bit over. I mean, I said 1 inch if you go over. And I actually have a stripe on my fabric right there, so I'm going to use the stripe to my advantage. I'm going to do the same here. Another stripe. And this is the other stripe down here. Just like that. Turn over to the other side. Because it's dark, I could have also used a chalk liner on this. Okay. All right. So I've marked everything. For those of you who are with me in the pattern, I am looking at page, I think I'm up to page 12. See how good I am. Yep, I'm on page 12. So we're going to sew. I am sewing at a top stitching using a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, so it's not 1/8 of an inch. And that's because when I fold this in half, I actually top stitch at a 1/4 of an inch, because if you try to do 1/8 of an inch, it can tend to roll off of your stitching. So I'm going to do a 1/4 of an inch between the 1 inch and the 2-inch marks on both of these at a 1/4 of an inch. And you can back tack at the start and the stop. And I'm just going to make sure I roll this under so it's as flat as possible. And let me switch you over so you're seeing what I'm seeing. At the sewing machine. All right, so I'm going to start here a 1/4 of an inch. For me, the edge of my presser foot's a 1/4 of an inch. You can determine on your machine what that is. I'm going to put it a stitch length of between a 4 and a 4.5 for top stitching. I'm going to back tack, go to the other line. And it's okay if you go a little bit over, because remember I said we're going to connect those lines anyway at the end. So that's the first stitch down that I did, and then I'll do one on this side as well. So we're going to do this 4 times. Per strap, it'll be 4 times, a total of 4 times. Right, 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom. Okay, and then I'll do the other side as well, the other end, I should say. So that's one strap, and we'll do the other strap the same way. And then once I've done this, I'll go back to the cutting mat and we'll do a little bit of cleanup. The only thing bad about the clips is they get caught on the edge of the sewing machine. All right. So now that I've done that, just going to snip a little bit of these threads. And then we're going to set these aside. Okay. All right, so we've done that part of it. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do we did the attaching of the foam for the zipper closure, so that's done. So we're going to roll past page 13 in the pattern. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go over to top of page 14, and we're going to start constructing this top piece right here. So you will need your zipper, and your zipper length is pretty long. So you're going to need your zipper, and you're going to need your little pieces, these pieces that you put the foam on. So let me get my zipper and see if I stuck mine in the drawer, potentially. Okay, so that's going to be your zipper. It should be the same length. You can use double-sided tape for this. I'm not going to. What I will be doing, however, is just to make sure that these pulls, because it is a zipper by the yard, so to make sure that the pulls do not come out of off the zipper tape itself, I am going to back tack along the bottom. So over here, I'm going to back tack, and over here, I'm going to back tack across the bottom. And that's just so when I pull the zipper pull, it doesn't go flying off, and it helps to keep it in. This is a nylon zipper. Be careful when going over that because you can break a needle. So I'm just going to very quickly go to the sewing machine. I won't take you with me, but I will go to the sewing machine and stitch over those zipper teeth at the bottom. And you can use 1/4 inch because we are going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay. So now if you mark the center of your, and all I did was, I'll try to see if I can show you that. I don't know if you can see right there, I stitched across, just stitched back and forth. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at our piece. If you mark the center on the back, you'll know this is the center, and the zipper has to go in there. So I'm going to set this one to the side, and I'm going to start with this one. Since this is the center, it should be facing the zipper. I'm going to flip this over just like that. So the zipper is right side up, fabric is right side up. I'm going to flip it over just like that. And I should have that 1/4 inch on this side. Remember I said when you fused it in, there's a 1/4 inch, and that's for the seam allowance. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip the zipper to the actual top piece. If you have double-sided tape, you can run double-sided tape along that and also then lay it down. So you won't have to use clips or as many clips. If you have 1/8 inch double-sided tape, that's preferable because your seam allowance is 1/4 inch. So I'll show you this when I'm done. And what's nice is that foam, if you did the 1/4 inch, that's really what you're sewing against, is that foam at 1/4 inch. The zipper seems to be a little bit bigger. How did I do that? Yeah, cut it a little bit bigger. Okay, so now I've clipped that. So the zipper is face down, the fabric is face up. So when I pull it back, that is going to be my center. And then when I come back and do the other piece, those two should match in the middle. Okay. So let's go to the sewing machine. I tend to sew from this side, meaning the side with the foam, because for me, the zipper is flatter. If I sew from this side, I find that I'm pushing down on my fabric. So I like to sew from the other side, but do what you feel works best for you. When you get to the zipper pull, I will say to you, reach under there and pull them out of the way. And there is a little bump that goes across here. You want this to be as flat as possible. So by pulling this out of the way, it helps to flatten that again. And then you can always just pull it back. Okay, so let's go to the sewing machine and do that. I'm using a stitch length of 3. So I will turn it to 3. I just said I'm stitching on the other side and then I turned the wrong side up. Okay. And then I am going to back tack on this end. 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down. Take your time. If you're using clips, make sure to readjust so that your zipper is flush with the edge of your fabric. So I'm getting to my zipper pull. Leave your needle in the down position. I am going to lift this and move my zipper pulls back that way. If you have to, you can raise your zipper pull. I didn't have to. It cleared mine. So I'm good. Okay, so that's one half. So let's go back to the cutting mat. And you can see that I've sewn that in. So if I push it back, you should have like a little bit of a padding here because it is 1/4 inch. And so there will be a little bit of a padding right here, but that is your zipper sewn in. So the next thing we have to do is add the back part, or what's going to be on the inside, so that this looks like it's finished. So I'm going to fold my zipper back down. I'm going to grab my top piece and I'm going to add that to it. Quick question, what did I do with it? Bottom top. Okay, so we'll cut a piece for that. I had it on my stand here and I don't know what I did with it, so it's okay. At least we don't have to interface it. So you don't have to watch me go through the interfacing process, and it will give you a chance if you want to catch up. So the inside is waterproof canvas as well. I'm trying to think of the best way to cut this so that I get a straight edge. Okay. I'm going to cut it this way. And you need 2 pieces. So you should have cut 1 long piece and then cut it in half. So that's what you should do. And I'm going to make very quick work of this. I'm going to weight this down. Cut this. we're going to cut one more piece for our strap, and then I'll just cut it down to the appropriate length. All right, so once we've done this and we have the pieces, we're going to lay this right sides together with the fabric, or wrong side up, which is a waterproof canvas. So I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to grab one of my pieces, my finished part with the top already attached, and I'm going to take this piece. This is the right side, all right? And I'm going to take the right side of my waterproof canvas, which is the fabric side, not the plastic side. And I'm going to lay it right on top of that, just like that. And I'm going to clip it in place. So I didn't cut mine, and I'm not worrying about it because I'll trim it off when I'm done. So I'm going to do this, align those edges, and I'm going to clip. Remember, it's right sides together, and the fabric side is the right side on the waterproof canvas, the side that feels like it's fabric. We're then going to go back over and we're going to stitch again on those same lines at 1/4 of an inch. Normally what I would do is I would do a basting stitch, and I think that's what the instructions have you do, of 1/8 of an inch, and then you come back and do the full 1/4 of an inch later. But we'll just stitch over those lines. I am going to sew from the opposite side, so it will be waterproof canvas side down. So I've clipped that in place. Let's see, I can see that. So I'll just cut this off. Actually, I'll use my rotary cutter, and I'll cut that excess zipper off as well. All right. So now we're going to go back to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew this right on that 1/4 of an inch line. So let's do that now. Once again, when you get to your zipper pulls, move them out of the way. I don't have to change my stitch length because it is exactly the same as it was. I'm just going to back tack. And my clips are upside down. I will be moving these zipper pulls out of the way. So I'm going to move them down for now, and then I'll move them up when I'm done. If you have to lift your presser foot, make sure that your needle's in the down position so it doesn't shift. Okay, so now we're done with that piece. Let's go back. The cutting mat, I'm just going to trim this a little bit here. And then if we open it up, it's like this, and we pull this, and I can clip these ends here just to hold it in place for right now. And I'm just pushing it so it meets the end over here. And I'm just going to clip them in place for right now. We're not going to sew this closed. We're just going to, I'm just pushing it out of the way. We will not be sewing this closed at all. So now if I flip it over, that's 1/2 of my zipper done. So let's go back and do the other side of the zipper. Okay, so now we're going to grab that other piece of foam, or that other piece that we added the foam to of our zipper, which is this piece. Once again, you should have marked the center. If you forgot, you could just line them up like this so you could see that that's where my motif is. This is right side up. This is right side up. I'm going to flip it over so it's wrong side down against the right side against the zipper, and it's wrong side up. So I'm going to line this up with the zipper, and we're going to do the same thing. So I'm just going to clip this in place. And put as many as you want. Once again, if you have double-sided tape, you can use that as well. Okay, so then when I open it up, you can see those match in the middle. I'm going to stitch this. I'll do this one the way that the instructions said. I'll baste it 1/8 of an inch and then come back and sew it 1/4 of an inch, just so that you, for those that are following along, you'll see what I did. So let's go back to the sewing machine. All right, so 1/8 of an inch, baste it in. I turn my stitch length to the longest length. In my case, it's a 6. And then I'm just going to baste this down. It's basted at 1/8 of an inch. I don't remember if I said that. Just making sure I didn't get to my zipper pulls. And they're right here. So I'm going to slide them up, out of the way. Okay, so the next part is to add the waterproof canvas piece to the underside of this. So let's go do that. All right, so we have that. You can see what's happening here. And then we're going to get our second piece. And we're going to close this up, flip it over to the, so it's on the zipper side. And then we're going to add the second piece. Remember, it's right side down, wrong side up. And we're going to add that and clip that. And after we've done this, we will be sewing at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So when everybody sews, do you listen to anything? Do you watch TV? Do you listen to music? Or do you sew when it's quiet? Some people like quiet to sew by. Okay, so now we have that. It looks just like that. All right, so on one side, it's the piece with the foam on it, which is the top of our zipper. And then the back side is the wrong side of the waterproof canvas. So we're going to go back to the sewing machine. Sew at 1/4 of an inch, and we're going to need to change our stitch length, right? So we're going to change our stitch length to a 3 or a 3.5. I'm going to turn this over, cut off some of this extra material that I have here. Okay, so now we're going to trim it up. Nancy said, that's so funny. Okay, Nancy said, right now she's listening to thunder. But normally it's quiet. Della says quiet for her. And let's see. Arnetta says she listens to Mozart or turns on, Science Channel or Curiosity Stream. Interesting. So everybody sews a little bit differently. Yeah, I don't know if I could sew with it quiet. I guess the hum of your sewing machine is not, it takes up some of that quiet, right? So it's not really, really quiet. It's just a little bit quiet. I just wonder what people watch. I know some people go, oh, I was binge watching this while I sewed. They watch Netflix or Hulu or whatever the latest streaming services. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I removed the clips. I'm just going to pull this right out of the, match up the ends. And the reason I'm matching them up is because I want to top stitch. So I'm going to make sure that they're pulled even. So I don't want one to be shorter than the other. And I am going to top stitch. Okay, so once we've done this, I'm just going to trim my ends a little bit. But like I said, you're not going to, we're not going to sew along this edge. I know in the past on some bags we've done that. We're not going to do that on this one. And that's because when we're done, we're going to not use any binding. And so we need this edge open. So I'm just going to trim off this so it's even. And for those of you who are curious about why I did the center, now hopefully you can see that the middle here is in the center. Here we go. Oh, Nancy, you get distracted easily. Okay. Yep. Well, makes sense. I've been there. I actually, I'm one of those people who, quote unquote, binge watches something. I don't really binge watch it. I turn it on for sound in the background because I end up watching, when I do have an opportunity to sit down and watch it, I rewatch all the episodes again because I have no clue what happened. It was just sound. But I just feel like if I put on something that I have to pay attention to, I'll be like you, Nancy. I'll get distracted. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along this edge using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. If you can't do 1/8 of an inch and it's a challenge for you to get that close, you can do 1/4 of an inch. We just need to put a top stitch on this. Okay. And we'll do it along both edges, both fabric edges. If you need to, you can iron this. So you can iron this on the right side. You can iron it on the waterproof canvas side, but you don't really have to iron it on this side. If you need to iron it, it should be pretty smooth. And just be careful if you're using an iron that these are nylon or plastic teeth. So you want to make sure that you don't overheat these so that they melt. So let's go back to the sewing machine. My top stitch length is going to be a 4 or 4.5. It's up to you. It says same here. Even when I was in school, I couldn't have total quiet. For studying, I had to put on music. And I used to listen to a lot of jazz. All right, so we're going to do this. And take your time when you do this and keep going. So even if you go off a little bit, if you're going slow, just take your time and just get back on track and keep going. So that's one side. Full disclosure, I forgot to change my stitch length to 4, so I'm stitching it at 3, but it should be 4, a wider stitch, and I'll just make the same mistake on the other side. Okay, and we're done. So we've top stitched that down. I will show it to you. So we've top stitched it down on the back and on the front. So I'm going to take out all my clips now. Oops. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little tabs and I'm just going to sew them on so I don't forget to do it later. So these are going to be your little tabs. We're just going to take them and fold them in half. And you should start a little bit up because it will be a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so about 1/4 inch up is a good place to start. And I'm just going to clip them in place here. And I'm going to clip it in place here. Make sure that seam is to the back. Just makes it easier for later. And I'm just going to stitch them across on the bottom. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine and do that. And I'm stitching them at 1/8 of an inch using a seam allowance of a 3. 3.5. And I'm going to do the same here. There's no way to really clip these or pin these, so just stitch them right in there. Okay. So now that we've done that, we can set those as this aside because this is our zipper and it's complete. As complete as it's going to be for right now. And the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to get out my bottom piece. And bottom piece, I cut my foam a little bit wider, as you can see. And also on the bottom, I drew lines, but there's a 1/2 inch on either side so that it shouldn't go all the way to the end either. So I'm going to base stitch this foam in before I add my purse feet. So I'm going to flip this over using the longest stitch length on my sewing machine. I'm going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance on both long sides. You don't have to stitch across the short sides. You have to sew the tabs on the bottom piece. No. So Nancy said in the directions on page 2, I have you sew the tabs on the bottom piece. It doesn't matter where you sew them. I just didn't want to forget. But follow the directions. It doesn't really matter. Thank you for asking, Nancy. If I have you sew them here, then when you add this piece, which doesn't have the tab, and you flip it up, you'll still have a tab. So it doesn't matter where you do it. I think I had you sew it on the bottom piece because I had you fold this piece in half lengthwise. Let's get my scissor. So I had you fold it in half lengthwise like this. Mark the center. And then when you take the tab, it's easier to lay it on the center. So that's why I had you do it in the directions. If you're following the directions, absolutely do it the way it says on page 2. But it really doesn't matter when you do it. So the directions are correct. That's a great question, Nancy. Okay. So while I'm doing this, let me mark my centers top and bottom, left and right. So I'm matching the short ends, mark the center on the top and the bottom, and I already matched the long ends and marked the top and bottom. So, okay. And now I will lay it on here. Once again, there is a half an inch on either side. Just to make sure this doesn't shift when I start, I'm just going to put a clip on the top and bottom on both of the sides. I don't think I can do it on that side because it's so long. And then I'm just going to stitch along the long edges. All right. So let's go back to sewing machine. I am using a stitch length of 6. So please, it's a basting stitch. The basting stitches help so much in case you have to rip something out. Those little tiny stitches can be really, really annoying to rip out. I am doing 1/4 of an inch because it does have a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and that'll get hidden or consumed in there. Okay. And then we'll do the other long edge. All right, I'll trim my foam and then we'll measure for the purse feet. And I searched high and low today for my little handy dandy screwdriver and I couldn't find it. So, and these are screw-in purse feet. So they do, you will need a little small screwdriver for it. I'm actually, because I couldn't find my screwdriver, I'm going to use a hair clip. You'll see what I mean. So that's what I'm going to use to screw mine in because I could not for the life of me find my screwdriver. And now for the life of me, I can't find my hair clip. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to measure down on this one. I'm going to need an erasable pen or marker. And that's because I'm going to mark it on the right side. So I need to measure the center. So this is the center where I clip. So that makes my life easier. So this is the center. And this is for these purse feet that are right here. I apologize. I don't think you're seeing mine. There we go. These are the purse feet. So if you have 4 purse feet, you're going to skip the middle. So in the directions, I have you do these 2 and then do this one last because then I can say skip this one. Thank you, Nancy. She said, I'm on the sewing machine. So you should be able to see the cutting mat now. So in the directions, I have you put these in first, and then I have you put in the center one. That's because some people, like myself, sell packs of 4, not packs of 5, and then other times you'll find a pack of 5. So 4 will work totally fine as well. So we have a pack of 5. So I'm just going to put a little line in here, approximate, and this is erasable or heat erasable, and then I'm going to put another line at the center here. So that's my center mark. I have you measure across and down. So I'll start at the bottom only because it's easier. So from the center mark, I have you measure 4.5 inches over from this center mark, right? That's where I put that on. And then I have you measure up 1.5 inches. And then you're going to put a mark right here. All right. Hold on. I'm a little bit off. I'm a little bit off, guys. It's here and then 1.5 inches. So it should be here. I apologize. And then the same thing here. It's 4.5 inches over and then 1.5 inches down. And that's because my seam allowance is 1/2 inch. And I'm going to put another mark here. I'm not worried about this extra mark here. Oops. Because I can just, hopefully my iron's hot enough. I can just rub my iron on it and it goes away. All right, and then you're going to do the same over here. So you're going to go to the right-hand side. You're going to go over 4.5 inches and 1.5 inches down, and you're going to place a mark. And that's of the center, right, from the center. So I'm going to place a mark here, and then I'm going to do the same down here. I'm going to go from the center 4.5 inches and 1.5 inches up and place a mark there. All right. So now when you look at this, your marks should be about 2 inches apart. So the distance between this to this is about 2 inches center, the center mark. Okay. So now we're going to get our little purse feet that I have in here. And you're going to need your screwdriver. So let me see if I can find my clip as I was shuffling things around on my desk. Okay. I'm just using one of these little clips. And then I'm going to just snip the center. So you can use an awl. I'm just going to fold it in half and take a little snip of that center because it's going to get covered by your actual purse foot anyway. So I'm going to start in the middle right here. I'm going to fold it in half. If you have a hole punch, you can use a hole punch. I'm just going to take a little snip like that. It's a little tiny snip. And then I'm going to get the piece that's the screw, and I'm going to stick it in the reverse side. So I don't think I got through the foam. Yeah. So now that it makes a hole in there, right there, and I just want to take this little piece, it's the screw piece, and stick it through the hole. Right, and if you push down, it now comes up. I'll try to raise it to the camera. Hopefully I can show you. You see that? And then what you're going to do is take one of your actual feet itself. You're going to put it over the screw, and you're going to screw it, and you can screw it down. What happens when you screw it, this part actually starts to turn, and that's where your screwdriver comes in handy, because if you put it right in there and twist the front part here, it'll help you to screw it in. So that's why I said I lost my handy. So you basically are twisting in opposite directions, right? You're doing this. And then it helps to screw it down in there. You can use Loctite for this, but it is in there. So that's one. And like I said, I'm not worried about that because I'm going to, at some point, there's plastic on this. I'll take that plastic off. And then when you get your iron heated up, you can get rid of any extra marks. So now we're going to do the same thing here. And I do them one at a time. I don't snip them all at once. If I use a punch, then I can do it all at once. But when I'm doing it this way, sometimes I forget where I cut. And so it just makes it easier to do it one at a time. So we're going to take the next purse foot, and we're going to stick it right up in there. And like I said, you don't need any fancy tools to do this unless you don't get the foam. I didn't get the foam on the inside. Try not to make a bigger hole than necessary. And yep. And then we're going to put that one in. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to grab another purse foot. We're going to put it on. We're going to screw it on. You'll get your screwdriver. You'll stick it in the back and you'll hold it. And then you'll twist in opposite directions. And it should screw on there. I always start by screwing it on because it's easier if it's flat to get it started. by screwing it on that way. And honestly, it is getting, I can feel it getting tight. It may not seem like it is using this little thing, but it's pretty pointy. So all I have to do is hold it. And you'll feel when it's tight because it won't go anymore. Okay. So that's the second one. And I'll just keep going until I get them all done. It's always the last one that gives you the hardest time, right? All right, so this is the last one. And then the next thing I do is I add a piece of duct tape to the back. I actually use Gorilla tape on the back of this. And so we'll add that as well. I got that pretty tight. Okay, so now I'm going to grab my sticky tape here. It's very sticky. I normally have the gray one, and it doesn't really matter. I think this one sticks a little bit firmer than the gray one does, but I usually use that one. And I'm going to turn this over and I'm going to add a piece of tape to each one of those screws to hopefully prevent them from becoming undone. But this is Gorilla tape from Home Depot. Like I said, I think this one is stickier. If you have a light lining, like it's a cotton lining, the gray one works, I think, better, so you won't see it. Because remember, the lining covers your base, but if it's black, you may see black patches if you do this with cotton, with a cotton lining, which is why I use the gray. But I wasn't paying attention. I just said I needed tape and I grabbed it. Okay, so now that's it. Perhaps, Della, I do need Lauren's hole punch. I actually have a manual punch, which I use. So, but I have the manual one, which I like better because then it doesn't matter where this is. I can get to it. Okay, so that's empty. We've done that. And we've done the bottom. So let's go back to our directions very quickly, just for fun. Yeah, I need the decoration in I need rainbow. So we've done the foot. And now I'm going to go back. We've done the purse feet. I sort of skipped. We're going to go back and we're going to attach our rolled handles. So attaching rolled handles is on page 16. So I'm going to set this aside. This is ready for when we're ready to finish our construction. And just, I'm going to trim this up right here. And we're going to get our rolled handles. So we're going to get both of those. And we're going to need our top piece. Now, one of the things about attaching the rolled handles is I want to make sure I have the center. So I'm going to fold this in half and I will mark the center. I'll mark it on the lining and the actual exterior at the same time. So I'm just going to take a little snip. And that's because we have to measure left and right on this. So I'm going to do the same here. And before we attach them, we also want to make sure that our piece measures exactly 5 inches or 5. So we're going to lay this down. And there could have been shifting, like you see, I have interfacing here. So I'm going to iron that to make sure all my interfacing is not creeping out of the side. So I'm going to do some finishing little things here. So make sure everything is totally aligned and trimmed. All right, and I'm just going to iron that on the ends. And then we want to also make sure that it's totally square. So we're going to measure it to make sure it's exactly the right measurement. Because what we need to do is we need to attach this bottom piece to this, and we need them to be the same size, right? So you can see I have a little extra on this side that I need to trim off. So that's what I'm going to do. So if you follow the directions, it'll tell you how wide this is supposed to be. I'm going to move it over just a little bit. And I'm going to trim this off. Okay. And I'm going to make sure it's exactly the size that I need it to be. Zipper pulls are in the way. So what you would normally do is line up the center itself, the center of the zipper. That would be your center mark, right? And then what you would do is make sure on either side of the zipper, it's the same size, so that you get the right amount. I can see on mine where it is, so I can see what I need to trim off. Okay, so I just had a little bit. Okay. I will say that next what we're going to do is once you've marked the center by folding in half, so I'm going to come back here and do the center because I didn't do that. Because I realized it was off. Move these out of the way. Fold it in half. Make sure you pull that right in there. we're going to mark the center. Now the straps are going to go on either side to the center. So I hope that makes sense. So that's why I marked the center, because the strap is going to go on either side, this way and that way, to the center. When we're installing the straps, the other thing we want to make sure is that we're only sewing through the foam. We should not be sewing through anything except for the foam. So if you sew through anything but the foam, you'll be sewing to the lining. And I don't want you to see where the straps are attached. So we're not going to sew. We're going to need to move this lining piece out of the way. So what I do is I flip it up. So all I have is the foam, and then I lay it down. So I have 3 pieces on that side, right? Only 1 piece over here. I'm going to align this center line with one of my vertical lines. And then I'm going to measure left and right. And that's how I'm going to attach this, right? And then it's going to curve around this way on either side. Okay, so just to give you a preview of what we're doing. So if you look in the pattern and you're on page, make sure I get to the right page for you guys. So I'm on page 17, the top of page 17. All right, I explained the bottom of page 16. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to start on the right-hand side. Remember, I stitched this in. So I'm going to measure across here, and I'm going to put my handle or clip it right here. So it's going across, and it should be 2.5 inches. And this edge is on the 2.5 inch mark, that edge. And I use 2 clips to hold it in place. Once again, make sure you only have the foam, you only have the top, and that you flip the lining out of the way. All right. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. But what I'm going to do is I won't do this part yet. I'll sew this part down, but I will place a mark 2.5 inches over on this side, just so when I come back, I'll know exactly where I have to place it. All right, because that one's going to come at that. And this is a erasable one. So when I do the next one, I'm going to have to flip it over here to that actual mark. All right, but I won't do that right now because I want to sew this while it's flat. And when you're done, the distance between here and here should be 5 inches. So that's how you know that you have them placed correctly. So we're going to top stitch using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Remember, that was the seam allowance that we used over here. And then we have that 1 inch mark that's here. So I'm going to 1/4 inch up to that 1 inch mark, sew across, and then come back down on that 1 inch line that I had earlier. So that's the bottom of those individual lines. When I roll the handle and I pinch it, it's going to pinch right here, and I should be meeting that 2 inch mark or a little bit past it if you can get it. But we're just going to sew up to the 1 inch, 1/4 inch, across and down. All right. So that's what we're going to do now. And we'll do that for 1 strap. Any questions? I know that that was a lot of directions, but hopefully it was clear enough. And I just want to see, make sure. Yeah, okay. So I always start with the biggest seam allowance. So I do a 1/4 inch, and then I come back and I do an 1/8 inch. If you try to do the 1/8 inch, it could be a little bit trickier. So I do the 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to come back and do an 1/8 inch on this as well, just to reinforce it. So let's take this to the sewing machine and do that. I will back tack once again. Make sure that that lining is out of the way. I'm going to just fold this just like this. My lining is out of the way, but I'm just going to fold it just like this. Because I want to be able to put it in my throat of my sewing machine. So I'm just going to fold it like that, put this like this, and then I can get it in the throat of the sewing machine. Once again, 1/4 inch seam allowance. Turn your stitch length down to a 4, or up to a 4, I should say. And Then we're going to sew to the bottom of that line, and we should be getting at the bottom of that line where the lines connect, that 1-inch line, because we did that, right? I will back tack, and then I will leave my needle down. I will lift my presser foot and I'll rotate my material 90 degrees, just like that. I'll then sew across that 1-inch mark. Till I get to within 1/4 of an inch, and it should be right where that other stitch line is here. Once again, needle down, lift and rotate. And then sew to the bottom and back tack. All right. So once you have that in, we're going to sew an extra line that's 1/8 of an inch, just so that that isn't flapping around over there. So we're going to turn it around one more time and do 1/8 of an inch. Same thing. When you get to that 1-inch line, just sew across the line that's already there. All right. So we're not going above it. We're just going to sew right across it. When you get here, one thing I didn't mention is roll your needle so it starts to go up. That way you know it caught your bobbin thread, and then rotate and go back across that 1-inch line till you get to about 1/8 of an inch from the end. Rotate. My needle's going up. Rotate my fabric and then stitch down and back tack. Okay, so that's in. So what we're going to take a look at the cutting mat is just to remind you, you can see that I just sewed it to the back of that. I did not sew it to this. If you want and you have a rivet, you can always put a little rivet in there if you want to hold it firmer, but that's the way it should look. And then once we get the front and back sewn on, this will fold under, and that's where your handle is going to come up just like that. All right. So let's do the same to the other side. So I already marked mine over here. Make sure your handle is straight. You're going to wrap it around just like that. I know it looks messy, and you're going to clip it right here to this edge. Make sure that it's to the left of that mark that you made. Okay. It should only be on the foam. It should not be on the lining. So we're going to make sure we clip this out of the way. So I just fold this up from my throat of my sewing machine so it's out of the way. All right. And then I'm going to do this at the sewing machine. Start at the bottom, back tack, and then you can come up to the 1-inch line. I should have left my clips in. All right, 1/4 of an inch first, and then 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so that was my 1/4 of an inch. I'm now going to come back in and do my 1/8 of an inch. And remember, you're going over that same 1-inch line that you just did before. So you're just sewing right over it. Okay, so that's one handle that's sewn on. So let's finish this handle up so that you can see how it's supposed to look, and then we'll go back and do the other one. All right, so now it looks kind of messy, but at least the handle is locked in. So next what you're going to do is you're going to take your handle and you're going to fold it in half, matching these edges here, the side edges. So this is why I said if you do it, it'll be totally, you got these flat. Like I said, if you want, you could try it the other way and see if it works, if you can get it to work. So I start around the middle. I fold this over, make sure this is folded over, and then I fold it in half this way, right? So I fold that over, fold this over, and then I fold it totally in half, just like that. And just push it down with your fingertips so everything is inside. And then I place a clip. And then I just work my way down on the left and on the right. And I do the same thing, left and right. Now this will get fiddly when you get to the sewing machine, I'm not gonna lie, but you'll see that once you get there and start sewing, it'll take shape. So all right, and we're gonna sew this using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And I'm just trying to get that in as much as I can. Okay, so you can see that that's 1/2 of it done, but you can see why I put the fabric there. And then we're going to do the other side now. So the rivet would be placed above. Correct. That's a great question, Della. So yes, the rivet will be placed above your seam allowance. So it's going to be higher than 1/2 an inch. So if you wanted to look at it, you could mark 1/2 an inch and then place it right here above. If you wanted to put a rivet in it. All right, so almost done. So that was a very good question. Yeah, don't place it down here because you have 1/2 an inch. You can actually feel where it is. So if I fold this over like this, that's going to be the seam allowance. The rivet would go right here in the middle, right here, right above it. Okay, so now this is what the rolled handle is going to look like. You can see it is pretty stiff in there. And then I'm going to go on this side. I'm going to fold it, and you can start, which is why I had you do the 2-inch. You can start at the 2-inch mark and sew all the way around to the other 2-inch mark. So from 2-inch mark to 2-inch mark at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Everything is pretty flexible, so you can, decide which side you like to sew on. If you want to start from this side or the other side, but that's the reason I had you do that 2-inch mark. So let's go to the sewing machine and sew it down. I'm going to turn it up to a stitch length of 4 or top stitch length. I'm going to try to figure out which way I like it. I forgot which way I did it before that I liked it. I think I liked it this way. I'm just folding this in half and you can press everything under your presser foot. Probably the hardest part is getting it started. Once you get it started, it's pretty easy. So I push mine in the back. I look for my 2-inch mark, which is right there. I drop my needle, and then I'm just going to follow this all the way around and make sure that everything is lined up. For some reason, my presser foot droops down in the back, so it's very hard to get things under there. Okay, so once I've done that, I'm going to drop the presser foot, and I'm just going to go around. 1/4 inch seam allowance. Back tack at the beginning and the end. And then make sure when you get to the other side that you have it folded as well over here. And then you can go a little bit past the 2-inch mark if you'd like. But back tack. Okay, and that's one rolled handle done. So you can see why I didn't have you do it at 1/8 of an inch. All right, so that's one of your rolled handles done. All right, and you can see, like I said, you can see how by doing it that way, this comes out square, and hopefully you can see how that, you see how that curved? It would have been harder if I tried to lay and get this flat once I had that curve in there. So we're going to do the same to the other side. This one should go a little bit quicker. I know, right, Della? Phew! I don't know. I hold my breath every single time with certain things. I just inhale and I don't breathe. I know it seems like I am because I'm talking, but I'm really holding my breath. Okay, so we're going to take this one and we're going to do the same thing. So lay this down. You're going to measure over. Move your lining out of the way. That's always key. Move the lining out of the way. Place this down, measure over 2.5 inches and clip this in place. And I always do them one at a time also because I'm always afraid that if I try to do this, I'm putting too much tension on this side as I sew. So I'm going to measure across 2.5 inches. I'm going to sew this in once again, 1/4 of an inch across the 1-inch line, come back down, then 1/8 of an inch across the 1-inch line, and then back down. So I'll do both those row of stitches. I won't have to explain it unless you guys have a question, but we've done it before, so it won't be as much explaining. Okay, so I'm just going to go back very quickly and do the other mark on the other side. And then I'll come back to the sewing machine and we'll sew that one in too. So that's what I'm doing off camera. I'm just making sure my placement is correct for the other side. Last thing I wanted to have is wonky pieces. Remember that time when I didn't have a needle threader? Remember that time when I broke my needle threader? Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold this guy in half again to make the other strap. So I'm going to start in the middle. Fold it in half. And then do the other side as well. Okay, so then that's the other handle that I'll have. So I'll go back and I'll sew this at 1/4 of an inch. Once again, try to match that 2-inch sew line. You can go a little bit over it, but you want to connect them. So let's go back to the sewing machine. Now, what you can do also is if you want a little bit more wiggle room is you can open up your zippers because they shouldn't come off. But you can open up the zippers if that helps you get it flatter under here. Okay, 1/4 inch seam allowance. I am using a stitch length of 4 again. Back tack at the beginning and the end. Okay, so we're finished with our handles. Another, whew. And we have both of those on there. So just snip a couple of these threads. Okay, and that's what your handles will look like. Once again, make sure that they're not sewed to the lining because we're going to have to make sure that that lining, we're going to attach the lining separately to the top and the bottom, but that's it. So now we're going to put together the exterior completely. Yeah, you guys have been with me a while. You remember that my little having no threader and then having to thread it manually was a pain. Okay, so we're going to need this piece, we're going to need the top piece, and we're going to need the exteriors. But for right now, let's just take this top piece and the bottom piece where we added it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bottom and put it right sides together or wrong side up with my top piece. And remember, I said they should be the same width. I'm then going to clip them together. And the center notch here should match the center notch with the zipper. Now, one thing I'm going to say is when we sew this, there will be a hole in here. And so we're going to have to close up that hole. And I'll show you what I mean. So in here where the tab is, there's going to be a hole. Because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew up to here on one side and from the other side from here to that middle. But I'm not going to sew straight across, right? Because I need the pieces to be separate. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to sew about a 2-inch line here on the top so that it closes any hole that may appear right there. So let's take a look at what we're going to do. So this is the bottom. You're going to come back and you're going to measure by putting, I have some wires here, by putting the center of this there, you're going to measure about 2 inches on either side. But before I do that, what I want to do is I want to attach this bottom piece to my top piece so that when I open it up like this, it's attached to the bottom, to the exterior. So I'm going to clip these together so that they're out of the way. That's the first thing I'm going to do. I've clipped these two together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew from right here where the seam is across. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to either sew from this end right into where the seam is. Once I'm done, I'm then going to sew across this opening to close it up. So I hope that makes sense. All right. So I'm clipping this out of the way. The lining piece is out of the way. I'm clipping my bottom to my zipper because that's all part of the exterior. And I'm just going to sew on the zipper portion, not the lining portion. I'm going to sew in at a 1/2 inch, but I'm going to sew from one end or from the middle out at a 1/2 inch, only up to this point, right? I'm not going to sew straight across. I know, Della, thank goodness that's done. So let's go to the sewing machine and sew that. Yeah. All right. 1/2 inch, stitch length of 3. So I'm going to turn my stitch length down to a 3 at a 1/2 inch, and I'm going to sew. I'll start from the outside here. And I'm going to sew this at 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch should be where the foam is in here, where you had it cut. So back tack at the beginning and at the end, and then just sew. Once again, stop when you get to right there. All right, so get as close as you can. I know you top stitched on the zipper, but get as close as you can and stop and then back tack. So that's 1/2. We're going to do the same on this other side over here. All right. So I'm going to flip it around. And the reason I do it with this part showing up is because if I do it with the lining, I may overshoot it and I may actually stitch this down. This way I can see exactly what I'm doing. So I'm going to start here at a 1/2 inch and I'm going to stitch across. Okay, so then that's done. So now is where we're going to stitch that zipper piece down. So, right, so I've only stitched the outside, but this is the part that I was telling you about. If we open this up, I can actually stick something like a pen. You see that opening? If you can see that opening at the bottom, that's what I need to close. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm on the bottom. I'm going to mark an opening about, I'm centering my zipper and I'm going 1 inch to the left and 1 inch to the right. And then I'm going to stitch that closed. So that's really what I want to do, right? I want to stitch this opening here closed. So if you go to 1 inch, it should be about right. All right. The other thing you can do is if you want, you can stitch from where you stopped on this side and where you stopped on this side. And you can just stitch that distance also. Okay, so I'll stitch the shorter distance. I'll stitch from the end of the zipper to where I stopped stitching. Okay, it doesn't matter. Do 1 inch, whatever works out. And I can lay it flat because I'm only stitching a portion of it. I'm not stitching the whole thing. So it's okay if you lay it flat and just stitch and back tack. So let's go to the sewing machine and do that. And that's also at a 1/2 inch. So once you've done that, you should not be able to stick anything down that hole. All right. So then that, and it's going to go away when we put in our lining. So now this here is totally sealed and I can't stick anything in there. And that's my tab. So we're going to do the same thing with the opposite side. Right. We're going to move our lining out of the way. Clip it in place. We're going to match up the center notch here with our center of our zipper. And then we're going to match up the ends with the ends. And I have a little bit of interfacing peeking out over there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to sew on either the front or the back, however you want to look on it tonight. And then I'll leave you to do the other one for tomorrow. So that's what we have. Okay. Once again, you're going to sew in just inside of these portions. Don't sew straight across at a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. Remember the back tack at the start and the stop. Okay, and then I'm going to do the other side as well. So I'm going to flatten that down 1/2 an inch. And then remember, we're going to seal up the opening, right? So you can actually probably see it better on the bottom. So I'm just going to stitch from where I stopped to where I stopped at the same 1/2 an inch. You can do it at a 1/4 of an inch if you're afraid you may see it when we put it together. But we just need to make sure it's closed. So I'm not going the full length. I'm only going in that middle piece right here to make sure that it doesn't create a hole. So Nancy is on, hold on, Nancy. So we did the foam, which was on page 19. We marked the center. We put on the purse feet. So now I'm down to page 21 where I attached the tabs to the bottom. So I'm starting this piece. I'm at, when I started the construction, I'm on page 22, Nancy. And then where I mark it is step number 6 on page 23. Okay, I'm on page, okay. So here goes where we are. So on page 22 is where I marked it, right? Then I sewed across to those marks, which was on page 23, right? And then I think I did the gap is on, it says right before it says congratulations, you can see me sewing the gap. So hopefully that makes sense. Lay it flat, 24 says lay the gusset flat on the cutting mat. Measure 1/2 an inch to the right and the left. That's why I got that inch. So that's right before where it says congratulations, which is on page 24. Okay. So now we're going to take, hopefully you're with me, Nancy. We're going to take this lining piece because we want to make a full circle. And we're going to sew the lining piece to the zipper. I'm going to make sure that they're right sides together, just like this. And the same way that we sewed this to the top, we're going to sew the lining to the lining, right? So we're going to take the lining piece and sew it to the lining piece, leaving that gap there. And we're going to do the same thing, lining to lining. Make sure the lining pieces are right sides together. And we're going to use a 1/2 an inch seam allowance there as well. Okay. And then once we're done, we're going to come back and sew that closed one more time, just to make sure. So it's lining to lining, moving your top pieces out of the way. So we're going to fold these pieces out of the way because we don't need to sew those anymore. Right? And we're going to sew lining to lining, just like that. So it's the same way we did the other piece. We're just attaching the lining, and then we're going to turn it right side out. But it looks like the photo you saw, the gap, then top stitch, not during construction. No, I did it. I'll go back and look, Nancy, but I did it during construction because it's harder to do it without doing it now, because then you have to push the pieces in. So let me go back. Hold on. Let's turn this right side out. So what I did is, after I sewed it, sorry, you can, this is what Nancy's talking about, to top stitch it here after construction. I just think it'll be harder to do that for some of you. So I did it now instead, but in the directions, I don't have you sew that gap until after you're done. And then I have you put a stitch here. I think it's going to look ugly. So I think I'll go back and change it, because if you're not using the same color thread, it can get look ugly. But the gap is not there now. So the directions, thank you for that, Nancy. The directions say do this, then come back and sew this closed when I'm done. But I'm having you sew it closed now, so you don't have those stitches. Thank you for that, Nancy. I'll go back and I'll change it. I just try to do it so I don't confuse. Like, to show you, I can tell you, but in the directions, if I try to tell somebody that, it's kind of hard to explain. I'm always thinking, what's the easiest way to explain something? And so if you do it, I think if you do it now, it's easier, but it's hard to explain. So it's easier to just say, sew this, turn it right side out, do this, and stitch that. That's always easier to tell somebody than to explain it when I'm, writing the directions. So, but thank you. All right. So we're going to take this and we're going to clip the lining to the lining, and then the same on the other side. And guess what? I think one of my purse feet came off. I don't know how I did that. Okay. So let's do this. And then we're going to do this. And we'll do it at the same time at the sewing machine. I'm hoping everybody got that. And then I guess what I'll do is I'll do what's in the direction for this piece here, just to show you, because it's hard to explain. So now we're going to stitch this. So we'll stitch in 4 places. 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay. It's only on the lining. You're not stitching the 2 pieces together, so remember that. Maybe a little tricky to fold it out the way because you now have those rolled handles. But you can do it, I promise. So here you go. 1/2 inch. This is a stitch length of 3. And I'm going to sew right to the middle and back tack. And I'm going to flip it to the other side of the same place over here. And I'm going to do the same thing at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so sometimes your presser foot can't get like right in there. Like mine, I may have to turn it around because so I'm gonna have to turn mine around because my presser foot, the back of my presser foot won't drop that low. So I'll turn it around. Okay, and then I'm going to do the other side as well. So that's one side. Make sure your pieces are right sides together. You don't want the lining to be wrong sides together. You want them to be right sides together. And then I'll go back and I'll sew from the outside just to show you. Oops. So shifting. And then the other side. And I'm going to sew this, I think, from the top. Yes. And realize how slippery waterproof canvas is. So this is the part where Nancy was mentioning about the directions. So I'm not going to sew that gap. I'm not going to sew this gap here. When you turn it right side out like this, which is what I have you do in the directions, and you straighten everything out just like that, right? What we're going to do now is, and I can do it because I have blue thread. You know what I did right there. Did something on the side here. 1 second. Okay. You're going to hold it like this. Match up your side seams here. So match up your side seams here. And we're going to clip it temporarily on either side. So we're not going to sew them. We're just going to clip them because I want them flat. So this is what the directions say to do to close that hole. Then I'm going to lay it flat like this. And I'm going to measure across 1/2 inch from the center. So this is my center. I'm going to measure across 1/2 inch and place a mark. Hopefully you can see it. Right. So this is the center. I'm going to place 1/2 inch mark here and 1/2 inch mark on the other side. Just like that. And then I'm going to sew across here, which means that you'll also see it on the lining side here, which is why I had you clip it. And we're going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to have you stitch across here at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So you're only stitching between the little marks, right? Between those, and it should be 1 inch. And that will also close up. That's what the directions say, and that's how you'll close up the gap. And back tack. So I'll show you. That's how you'll close up the gap, that little stitch line right there at 1/8 of an inch. And then you also don't have any gap. So that's what Nancy and I were, well, actually, Nancy mentioned it. I was talking, she wasn't talking, but that's what, according to directions, that's what it has you do. So you're going to do the same on this side as well. Nancy always keeps me honest. That's what I love about her. Because you'll go back to the directions and you'll be like, but she didn't say that. So she's my eyes. She's my my fact checker. So we're going to do the same thing here. All right, so we're going to measure 1/2 inch on either side. Remember, at the center, so measure 1/2 inch to the left and 1/2 inch to the right. This is a heat erasable pen. So I'll do the same thing on the other side. I won't take you with me because it's really quick. It'll take me more time to switch the camera than it will to get this done. Okay. And I've done that. So it's going to heat up my iron a little bit here. And so nothing should be attached. All right. So that's everything that we need except for the front and the back. And I will show you how we're going to do one of the pieces, and then you can come back for homework and do the other piece. So I'm going to take one of my pieces, front or back, if yours are, distinctive, and I'm going to mark the center. So here goes the center, and here goes the center. Okay. I also should have marked the center on my lining piece down here because this is going to be attached to the outside, right? And then what I have you do is I have you put a 3-inch mark on either side here. So I have you lay this flat, line up the centers. And the 3-inch mark is meant to be a guide for you as you're attaching this, right? So ideally, this bottom piece corner here should hit that 3-inch mark. So that's how you know. All right. So now I have to turn my piece wrong side out. So I turn this wrong side out, just like that. Now remember I said we didn't sew the lining. We didn't sew around, and this is why. I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to lay it right side down, and starting at the bottom center, we can start at the top center. I'm going to clip my center mark here with my center mark there, just like that. And I'm only clipping it to one piece. I'm not clipping it to the lining because the lining, we're going to do our own thing for that as well. I'm just going to add a couple of clips going along the bottom, but I'm not going to finish it off yet because then I want to start clipping the top. So you're only clipping to the exterior fabric pieces. Then I'm going to take my center mark at the top and I'm going to clip it to the center mark on my exterior piece only. So don't do it on the lining, only on the exterior piece. All right. If it's easier for you, you can actually clip these pieces together like that so that they're out of the way so you don't forget or stitch over them. All right, but we're only stitching on the exterior pieces only. All right. Then you're going to look for that 3-inch mark that you made along the side here. There was a 3-inch mark. That should line up with your accent border piece here. So then you know it's even. And I push my seam allowance down. All right. And then once you've done that, you can start fitting your exterior piece in. Just like that. I think I got the wrong mark for my 3-inch mark. Okay, so we're going to just clip it all the way around the bottom. If you need to, you can snip around the curve to make it fit better. So little like 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch snips to get it around the curve. All right. So you're going to do this all the way around. Go up to the top. Now, when I sew this, I should have turned the clips up. I sew it from this side. So my piece, my front is flat down. So I should have put my clips on the other way around. So I'll turn them around now. And so you want the flattest side down. So then you do the same thing for the opposite side as well. And you just clip it around. And you're going to line up your 3-inch mark with the 3-inch mark that you drew on the front. That's right here. Mine is hard to see because it's this blue. And then you're just going to hook that in just like that. And you're going to do this all the way around the entire piece. Like I said, once again, if you need to, you can snip on the straight. Don't snip on the front or back, but snip on the straight if you need to fit it in there. So if yours ended up being snug, you can do that. Okay. And I just have some side over here to do a little bit. And we're going to sew this with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Just like that. The other thing is if you do it from, I just want to make sure I have my, yeah, I do. I couldn't see my mark on this side. If you do it this way, you're also guaranteed to keep this stuff out of the way, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to sew all the way around this using a 1/2 inch seam allowance and a stitch length of 3 or 3.5. So I'm just going to turn some of these clips the right way so that it's flat side down. And the other side is you're going to do exactly the same. So I'll do this side and then I'll explain to you the other side, but it's exactly the same. And then the exterior will be complete. I'm just turning these clips around for myself. Okay, one more. Good. All right. So we're going to go to the sewing machine. We're going to sew all the way around at a 1/2 inch seam allowance to attach the exterior, front or back, whichever one it is for you. I always start at the bottom. I don't know why. It's a straight portion, so I start at the bottom and I stitch straight across. That 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to put a little magnet here for myself, make sure I don't move too far off of the beaten track. All right, and stitch length of 3, and let's get sewing. When you get to that curve, you can take smaller stitches. I know some people take smaller stitches around the curve. I shifted a little bit. I shifted a lot of it. There we go. Around the curve, they take smaller stitches to help them navigate the curve. So smooth out your foam as best you can. And I drop my awl on the other side. I use an awl to help me also, just to hold it in place as I turn. So It also helps to make sure that I'm not, my fabric doesn't move underneath. I know some people use a stiletto, and I've seen them use it, but an awl works just as well as a stiletto. Just not getting your fingers in the way. Okay. I'm stitching over those rolled handles. And I'll come back and rip mine out later because I can't reach. I'm reaching so far forward that I know for a fact it's not straight where I want it to be. But you guys get the idea. And I'll rip it out so that tomorrow I have them both on there correctly. Okay, coming back around to the bottom. Got a little out of position here. And almost back to the beginning. There we go. Another sigh of relief. Like Della said, phew. Okay. Let's see how we did. So you can come back in, check all your seams. You're going to turn it right side out. Like I said, I'm going to come back and redo mine because I was standing like all the way back here from my sewing machine, so I'm not in place of the camera. I positioned it in the wrong place tonight, so. And I'm going to turn it right side out just so that you can see what's happening here. And you would have had half of your exterior done or 3/4 done. You just have to put on the other side. All right, so this is kind of floppy. We're going to address that tomorrow. But straightening everything out, this is what it should look like. Yeah, like right here, I have to clean up. Okay. But when you're done, know that piece. That's what it should look like, right? So your handles will be attached. You see that? Your handles will be attached. And that's what the bag will look like. It'll have your zipper at the top. So you're going to come back in and you're going to do this side, the back, and then your entire exterior will be done. So I'm just rolling these seams between my fingers to get them. But your entire exterior tomorrow should be done, and you have your rolled handles on there with no problem. And then we'll just flatten, these out, and we'll iron it. What I will say is to put the other side on, I've turned this right side out. You'll need to make sure that it's inside out, like this. Because you will be sewing this closed, I recommend that you open the zipper, right, so that you can get in the top to turn it right side out. So make sure you do that. But once it's wrong side out, or inside out as this case is, you're then going to take your other piece, put that on the same way we did this piece, attach it all the way around so it'll be totally inside out. When you're done, you can reach your hand in here and turn it right side out. Yes, Stella, we need a double phew for this one. I need a sound effect. But then when you're done, but you can see how nicely it all really comes together very nicely. And then, so you'll do that for homework. And then tomorrow is the lining and the pockets. If anybody who has a box does not have enough for the pockets and wants to add both of them, I will send it to you. Nancy did not have enough. And I think she got, the way it was cut, it wasn't cut correctly, but you should have a full 54-inch length of waterproof canvas for this. It's a half a yard, 54-inch. So I'm hoping everybody has enough for the double pockets. But if you don't, let me know, and I will definitely get you that extra piece. But that's the way it will look. And then when we're done, we will also add this to the bottom so it's not so floppy. Okay? Thank you. So, like I said, this is the one that I'm doing tonight. This was the fabric that came in the box with this. I took the base out of this one, so there is no stiffness to this. This kind of reminds me of, and I may be dating myself, but it kind of reminds me of a Pan Am. So the Pan Am Airlines bags that the airline stewardesses would carry, it has like kind of like that shape to it. So I may be dating myself, but rest up. No worries. Yeah, so I work tomorrow. Today was a long day. For some reason I had a lot of crazy meetings, but that's where we are. So we're going to stop there. Tomorrow we're going to be working on the lining. And so for the lining pieces, you just need the waterproof canvas corresponding pieces that you have for the exterior. And then you're going to need we're going to do the pockets. So tomorrow it'll be the pockets and putting together the lining. We've already, by the way, done this top piece. That's attached to this already. And we've done the bottom. So all we need to do is do the pockets and the side pieces and then put that together with these pieces that I said to you that are floppy. This is already done for us. So that's less things we have to do. So hopefully tomorrow won't be as long as today. There are two pockets that with a style that we've done before. There's slip pockets. One is 2 pieces, one is 3 pieces, 3 sections, and that should be it. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight. I really appreciated it. Hoping that when you go back and look at the video, it all makes sense if you weren't sewing along. It all starts to make sense to you, and that it made it easier for you. I apologize if anybody got confused when I was sewing on the tabs. I apologize for that. I was just trying to make them invisible. And so that's one thing about doing it live, right? Sometimes you get a little extra tip or a way to do something differently. And you don't get that necessarily in the directions, but the directions will work totally fine the way that they are. And I wish everybody a good evening. Have a wonderful Thursday. Once again, happy summer, because we're now in summer, and happy hump day. So we'll talk soon. Have a good evening. Good night.